Choosing a quilting design to finish off your quilt can be a daunting task. I have this Christmas table runner here that I would really love to get finished by Christmas. So I've been thinking about different designs that I could use for quilting. My first quilting option that I always think about is very simple, just straight line and just following some seams in the block. Often I like to sew along each side of the seam, and I love this design because it always highlights the block that I made so beautifully. Now, if you think that design is just a little too simple with just following the seams of a block, you could also think about adding some hand quilting in to make it stand out just a little bit more. Of course, that's if you enjoy hand quilting. So my go-to quilting style of just following along the blocks, I didn't think would work on this. My blocks are larger and I feel like it really wouldn't highlight the blocks really well, and the quilting wouldn't really turn out close enough together to secure this table runner that will likely have to get washed a lot. I have a few other straight line quilting designs that I went ahead and looked at that are some of my go-tos as well. I've shared them in videos. So there's 10 different designs altogether. They're split up between 2 different videos. So you could check those out if you need some more quilting designs as well. Another thing I like to do is go search online for quilting designs. I'll of course look at Pinterest. So as an example, I'll search on Pinterest for a Christmas present block and see the different quilting ideas somebody did for that block, just to try and come up with some ideas of my own. If I still haven't come up with ideas, the next thing I'll do is look at some of my past quilts that I've made and see if any of them spark my fancy on what I would like to quilt on the quilt I'm working on. So I went through my house and looked at some of the Christmas quilts I had out in particular because that's what I'm working on. And I really liked the quilting that I did on this Christmas present quilt. I just did some simple swirls. I was working on some of my free motion quilting, so that was an option there. And then when I got to this quilt, I knew this was what I was going to do. It's so fun how just some simple straight line quilting close together really makes a quilt shine. I don't know, what do you think? Do you like the look of it? But as soon as I saw this quilt, I was like, that is what I'm going to quilt on my quilt that I'm working on now. And oftentimes that's always what happens for me. I'll finally see something and I just know that's what I'm going to do on my quilt. And plus, as a bonus, this is really, really easy. So I'll be able to finish up the quilting on my table runner in no time at all. For the straight line quilting on this quilt, I am first going to just follow along a seam that extends the whole length of the quilt and get my initial set of lines in place. I moved the length on my machine up to 3 for my quilting stitches. I'm going to remove a few of these pins just to start with, just so I can get a nice smooth line of quilting. And when I am straight line quilting, I always start my stitches off in the batting in the back of the quilt so that when I trim around the quilt, it just cuts off all of the start and finishes of my quilting so I don't have to go in and sink any threads. I am sewing a bit too fast, so I'm going to turn down my machine to the slow turtle pace. The faster I go, the more mistakes I can make in not staying lined up straight, so I really want to slow down a little more. I really like to sew fast, so I always have to remember to slow down when I'm quilting and when I'm doing the binding on a quilt. Now, just as a note, I would usually sew down the middle of the quilt first and work out to the side. But since this is a really small quilt, it's, you know, a table runner, I feel fine starting at one side and working across to the other side. If it was a larger quilt, I definitely wouldn't work on one side first. I would work in the middle. But like I said, this is a smaller quilt. I think it'll work out fine for this. Okay, so now instead of marking all my straight lines across here that I need to quilt along at an even space, I'm just going to use my Quilt-Lock here to get those straight lines in. So I'm just going to decide by looking at the lines on here how wide I want my lines to be, my lines of stitches, and then I'll just sew right alongside of it. And since I have all these marked lines, I can do the same distance apart each time without having to mark everything. So I'm just kind of see here. I think I'm just going to do a 1/2 inch. This is marked at a 1/2 inch apart. I think I'm going to do the 1/2 inch so that I can still get a line of stitches over in the small border I did as well. So I'm just going to line up the side of my presser foot along the side of the Quilt-Lock. And so this is a 1/4 inch thick. So it's not very likely that the foot is going to go under it or on top of it or anything like that, but just be careful. But I'm just going to line up the side of my foot alongside of here. I didn't put on my walking foot. I didn't feel like switching it out for this. And to be honest, the Juki walking foot is not that great anyway. The walking foot on my Bernina is much nicer. I have complaints about different things with my Bernina, but the walking foot on that was much nicer than the Juki walking foot. And again, for a small project, I think this foot is going to be fine. So I'm just keeping the line on my Quilt-Lock lined up with my previous stitches as best as I can, and I'll move it along. And I just keep the foot, the presser foot, lined up along the side of the Quilt-Lock. There are grips on the bottom of this as well that help hold in place so it doesn't slide around. And just keep in mind, even though these are marked a 1/2 inch away, you're going to add a little bit of width onto that with how far your needle is from the edge of the ruler. So this is probably about a 3/4 inch spacing apart, since I have a 1/4 inch on the side of the presser foot as well. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about the distance that you want yours to be, your stitches to be. Okay, so I'm just going to keep filling the quilt up with lines of stitches. Oh my goodness, here is the table runner all quilted. I went ahead and I trimmed it up just so I could see it a little more cleanly. It's kind of hard to tell how beautiful it looks when you have all the extra batting and backing hanging off. At least I think it is. It always looks a little better cleaned up to me. I absolutely love how it turned out. I feel like quilting really brings a quilt to life. I mean, that makes sense since it's a quilt, but I just think even simple quilting like this really makes a quilt shine. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments, but I am really happy with how it turned out. There's the back if you want to see that. I thought of one more quilt I really wanted to show you that has just simple quilting on it. It is not really straight line because it has a wave to it, but it's close together just like the quilting I just did. And I think it just really turns out beautiful on a quilt and it's so easy to do. So just another idea that you can keep in mind is that if the straight line isn't calling to you, if you don't want to go through the trouble of measuring a perfect distance apart, doing this wavy look is so fun as well. And I think it really highlights a quilt nicely too. Thanks so much for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.